Good morning. How are y'all?
So good.
It's wonderful to see you, Creative Dallas. I'm gonna take this off. It's Gucci. It's not what you think, though. Estate sale, $7.
Nice.
Some dead guy's scarf. But I honor him by wearing it. I'm gonna read a Facebook post to you. I wrote this the other day. It's on the theme of pain. I've been thinking this morning about Manny, one of the mocosos from my youth. Like my mother, he too looked like the before the Spaniards arrived Mexican, while I could see the conquered and the conqueror in my reflection. I don't think I ever looked at him and saw a boy. I remember thinking he was half God on his mother's side, half beast on his father's. The way he shimmied up drainage pipes on the sides of buildings, standing on rooftops to close his eyes and be closer to the divine, to look down and spit on a world that went out of its way to look down on him. He was always moving forward, rarely standing still, never moving backwards. Jumping off a 2-story building to immediately roll in the grass the second he hit the ground. Doing a backflip off a swing while standing, picking a fight with the biggest kid in 7th grade just to see how hard he hit, what that impact felt like. Yes, he was careless, but he was also impossibly fearless, running toward pain, never from it. That is how Manny lived. As terrifying as it may seem at times, I want to live like Manny. Confront the pain I felt. Face my shortcomings as a father and partner and person, and in doing so, move not away from pain, move not away from those shortcomings, but toward them, through them, beyond them. So, it's gonna get heavy, y'all. Jeez Louise, it's gonna get heavy. I read this poem like 20 years ago at college. This is an old poem. It's got that old poem smell to it. And a young student came up to me, she was probably 19, and she said, "You do realize your poem has its own Tumblr verse?" And I said, "What's that?" She said, "You're not on Tumblr?" And I said, Teach me. What is that? I've never heard of it. She's like, "There's this thing called Tumblr." And Tumblr verse is when something's just like gone viral on Tumblr. Your poem, Final Exam for My Father, has its own, like people are writing their own final exam for their mom, final exam for their grandfather, final exam for their professor, based off your poem. And I thought it was cool. She was like, "It's been shared like over 100,000 times on Tumblr." I was like, wow, that's awesome. So I'm gonna start with this one. It's an old poem. I was a public high school English teacher for the best 7 years of my life, but I've been my father's son my whole life, you know? So this is a combination of both those experiences. This is called Final Exam for My Father. 1. True or false? The night you walked out on me and my mother, you hesitated before grabbing the doorknob. 2. If a bus leaves the city at 60 miles per hour to nowhere in particular, and a man on that bus has left his only son behind in the darkness of that city, how many miles will it take before that son forgets what his father's hands look and feel like? 3. On the night that you left us, how many hearts did you break? A, 1, mine. B, 1, my mother's. C, 2, mine and my mother's. D, 3, mine, my mother's, and yours. 4. True or false? In certain species of the animal kingdom, when a male member of that species abandons his offspring, that male member of that species is ostracized, beaten, and in some instances killed. 5. In the space provided, define the terms further, farther, and father. 6. On the night that your father died, what, if anything, did you have to say to God? 7. When we survived 9 days in a row before the welfare check came in on a bag of maize and a crock pot full of wishes that tasted just like frijoles, did you feel the fire on your fingertips every time my mother winced as she turned the tortilla on the open flame? 8. Because of your blood, I have spent every day of my life enveloped by skin that's too light to be brown and too dark to be white. I used to hate this about myself, but I finally come to love this about myself. What do you love and hate about yourself? 9, as a young man, you A, never loved a young, beautiful, dark brown woman. B, loved one young, beautiful, dark brown woman. C, loved many young, beautiful, dark brown women. D, loved only the idea of young, beautiful, dark brown women. 10, list 5 things you're truly grateful for and 5 things you're truly regretful for. 11, a famous American poet's mother once said, Single mothers are almost always better men than men are. What do you make of this, Father? 12, without using the words I'm or sorry in the space provided, write an apology letter to my mother. 13, on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being not difficult and 10 being quite difficult, how challenging do you think it is for a Weddle to grow up in the barrio of the Lower East Side? 14, as a child, your son remembers hearing in hushed whispers not meant from his ears, from his drunk uncles, that more than likely you are not that child's father. What, if anything, do you have to say to them? 15, finish this sentence. My son, if I only had one thing to say to you, it would be, and one final question to conclude the test. Father, would it mend or break your heart if I told you I forgive you? Thank you. So, I am your inaugural Dallas Poet Laureate. I have 3 months left in my term, in my 2-year term. It's been wonderful. I love Dallas. I mean, I love it. My tío Tino used to say to me when I was in Mocosa, he would say, if you ever make something of yourself, tell them you were born on the mean streets of East Dallas. He said, I mean the mean streets. I was flying up Gaston Ave. Your mom was in the back seat. I was heading to Baylor. You were happening. I think it's just a beautiful story. But I love it. But just because you love something doesn't mean it can't break your heart, you know? Dallas does that to me too a lot. I think I'm going to read you something from my new book. So I wrote this book called Occupy Whiteness, and the incredible team at Deep Vellum Books are bringing it to life. I'm going to read the epigraph, or that's not right, not the right term for it. The informational introductory page. It's kind of like a key that will help you figure out why you're doing what you're doing inside this book. This is called A Conversation with a White Poet at a Prestigious Literary Festival. So let me get this straight. You take a book by a white male author and you read it until a page jumps out at you for whatever reason. You then erase every page before it and every page after it. Then you select somewhere between 3 and 14 random words on that single page and erase all the other words, leaving those isolated words floating in a sea of white space. You then occupy that white space with what you're calling brown verse. Is my understanding correct? Yes, it is. But don't you feel bad about taking words, even if it's just 3 isolated words on a page from a white male author? No. Why not? Because you see, I'm not taking any words. I'm discovering them. I'm colonizing them. So that's how all the poems in this book are formed. I had to read a lot of bad writing, y'all. I got to a point where I knew I was going to write this poem, this very long poem that I wanted to go for like 14 pages. So I had to find 14 pages in a novel by a white male author, and I was desperate for one word. I wanted to erase the entire novel and the entire page in this 14-page sequence with the exception of one word. I needed one word to anchor these 14 pages, and the one word I needed was she. You want to know a word white male authors hate? She. I think I read 37 books before I finally found one. So this was the process. Each of these poems took weeks, sometimes months to write. This is a 2-year chunk of my life. And when I finally sent it to Deep Vellum, and the brilliant Sebastian Paramo, my editor, said to me, why don't you embrace hybridity even more? Since these are, I call these hybrid erasures. And I started these during my MFA. And one of my professors was Natalie Diaz, and I said to her, I'm thinking about calling these hybrid erasures. And the brilliant genius, Guggenheim genius, Natalie Diaz said to me, I've never heard of anyone doing it. So you're inventing it, so call it whatever you want. When I sent this to Sebastian, Seb said, Why don't we embrace hybridity even more? And why don't you put in some essays and micro essays in the book as well? It'll be a collection of poetry. It'll be something else. It'll be this unusual, indefinable thing, whatever this book ends up being. And I said, I love that. Yes, on one condition. The essays and the micro essays appear in Spanish first and then English. And I want those to be on black pages with white text and the poems to be on white pages with black text. And he said, I love it. And then I said, wait, I have another idea. I've been working on the border and with students in New Mexico and California and Arizona and Texas. I've been taking black and white photos of the border on both sides. Can I insert those in the book as well? And team of development was like, yes. I love working with a nonprofit. Because a lot of times when you have a publication house, they're like, no, it's too expensive. But Will Evans knows rich people, and he knows how to ask rich people for money. So they just kept saying yes. QR codes that lead to live performances? Yes! They just kept saying yes. I love it. So this is a very unusual book. And I'm going to read you one of the essays from it. This is called On the Life and Death of Adam Toledo. It's not. It's actually called something else. That's just the epigraph that opens it. I wanted all the essays to be untitled and undocumented. They're undocumented, the essays. They're not in the table. They're undocumented, but just as important. On March 29th, shortly before 3 a.m., Adam Toledo was shot and killed by a white police officer. Adam was running from the police at the time of the shooting and was carrying a gun in his right hand. He ditched the gun behind a wooden fence, turned with his arms raised upright, a submissive position, and was shot in the chest by a Chicago police officer. He died moments later on the scene. Adam was 13 years old. All true. The summer of 1984, I was 13 years old. On a makeshift football field formed with 4 stolen City of Dallas orange cones and a gridiron that was 1/3 dirt and 2/3 dream, we played Steve and his crew, the Northside Homies, in a game of 9-on-9 tackle football. They were older than we were. They were faster and stronger. They outnumbered us and actually subbed in players from time to time. There were 9 of us. I was the smallest and the weakest. But we had been playing street football together since we were mocosos. We had developed complicated plays drawn in the dirt. In one play, I was Tony Hill running a slant. In another, I was Drew Pearson running a button hook. In every play, Jesus Santos was Roger Staubach. Dropping back to throw a spiral as sacred as his name. We beat them. Not by much, but enough to piss them off something fierce. The fight started when Steve, who was the biggest Mexican I'd ever seen in my entire life, jumped Gustavo, our leader. Steve's best friend, whose name I can't remember, jumped in to make it 2-on-1. In an instant, Manny turned and shouted to me, "Joaquin, go get Gustavo and Jorge's brothers." I ran the 3 blocks to Gustavo and Jorge's house. I didn't run through the streets, but as the crow flies, cutting through yards, jumping chain link fences to make good time. Gustavo and Jorge's older brothers were always in and out of the pen, so I didn't know who I would find. As I approached their house, out of breath, I ran around the back, and there, working on an old 1976 Buick Regal, was one of their brothers in Tori, a vato loco who had just gotten out of the Marines and at the time had only 3 passions in his life: lifting weights, boxing, and smoking mota. Between rapid and short breaths, I muttered, "Steve and his crew jumped Gustavo, the dirt field behind Bottom Elementary." They told me to get in the car and get in the back seat. I did as I was told. They slammed the hood shut and jumped in, and we sped off. Must have taken us less than 90 seconds to get there. On the way, Tori pulled a snub-nosed .38 Special out of the glove box, flipped the cylinder open to see if it was loaded. It was. We drove over the curb, across the basketball top, and at breakneck speed, driving directly at one point through an old set of swings onto the dirt field behind Bottom. Everything seemed to be moving at breakneck speed in slow motion at the exact same time. Like we were in some low-budget Michael Bay film, but this was real. Gustavo was on the ground taking a beating from Steve and some other guy who was the second biggest Mexican I'd ever seen in my entire life. All of our crew were either being held back by multiple members of their crew or engaged in fights with 2 or more of them. Manny, who had never backed down from a fight in his life, was having problems holding his own, while Jesus had a guy in a headlock and kicked another guy in the neck on the ground. I jumped out of the car. A gordo I didn't see at all punched me directly in the mouth. I fell back, and just as he was about to kick me, the shots rang out. Gustavo's brother had taken the gun from Tori and fired in the air 4 times. Every one of their crew scattered, but Steve just froze. Tori and Gustavo's brother rushed him. Tori held his arms behind his back while Gustavo's brother pistol whipped him. Steve's face was covered in blood. As he crawled away, Gustavo picked himself up from the beating he had taken and ran up on Steve and kicked him in the ribs for good measure. Then the sirens rang out. Before I knew it, there were two DPD squad cars at the edge of the park, right where Vickery meets Henderson Ave. We all ran. Gustavo's brother handed Manny the gun. He and Tori jumped in the Buick and were gone. One squad car trailed after them. The other two officers got out and pursued on foot. We all spread out, but Manny and I ran together, as we always did. As we ran, Manny said to me, "I can't fuck with Juvie again. Here, take this." And he handed me the gun. As we turned into the alley that paralleled Bonita Boulevard, we heard the officer shout for us to stop. This only made us run with more veracity. I was 13 years old, running from a white cop with a blood-covered gun in my hand. All true. The alley meandered to the left, and I tossed the gun in a pile of garbage that was slowly being overtaken by a cluster of sunflowers. Months later, we would walk past those same sunflowers, and Manny would say to me, "It's funny how those things grow best in muck and filth." He was right. They did. So did we. The cop was gaining on us. The alley was a dead end. Just ahead of us was a brick wall that at first glance appeared to have no footing. Manny, who was running just ahead of me, had to have been one half acrobat on his mother's side and one half leopard on his father's side. He hit the wall in full stride, and in an instant he was up and over it and gone. I could feel the cop right behind me. Then I felt his fist crumple the back of my windbreaker, and I let both of my arms fling behind me, and I ran right out of my chaqueta. I followed Manny, and in an instant, I hit the wall. In an instant, I too was over it. I landed awkwardly, hurting my ankle. I limped for days. I lied to my abuelo, told him I hurt it playing soccer. It always hurt me when I lied to him, even if it was a lie to protect his feelings. I was 13 years old. I was not killed that day. I did not deserve to die that day. Had I been killed by that white police officer that day, laying face down in the muck and mire, sunflowers swaying toward the light as they were always wont to do, you would not be hearing this. My partner would have fallen in love with someone else. My daughters would still look more like their mother, but not at all like me. The poems unwritten, the pages blank. The students would have sat in front of a teacher who loved teaching as much as I did, or maybe not as much. All true. Adam Toledo has an older cousin named Lupita. Lupita has a 7-year-old daughter named Kayla. Every time Adam would visit Kayla, he would treat Kayla's dolls as though they were living, breathing babies, hold them, sing to them, be absolutely gentle with them. He did this to make Kayla laugh, which she did every time. Adam was skinny and funny and loving. He loved movies, especially ones with zombies in them. The guys I used to run with, Gustavo, Jorge, Mateo, Jesus, Jose, Red, Jojo, Manny, none of them were bad boys. They were lost boys who sometimes did bad things. Adam was not a bad boy. Adam very well may have been a lost boy who sometimes did bad things, but he was not formed from dust. He was formed from love and lust and flesh and bone and marrow and tears and hopes and fears and dreams and star stuff and yes, even dust. He could have been a teacher or a soldier or a writer or a mechanic or an actor or a husband or a father or a dentist or a retiree or a bad golfer or a grandfather. He could have been your someday friend or mine. He could have been all those things and more. But he can't, because he was killed that night in that alley. Adam was 13 years old. He did not deserve to die that night. I'd like to think in the moments before his death, he caught a glimpse of a sunflower growing in the muck and mire, leaning toward him. After all, sunflowers always lean toward the light. Thank you. So, you have your phones? You have a journal, pen and paper? That's right. I'll read more in a minute, I promise. Write down the word people. Underneath that word people, number down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Write down the word people, number down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now I want you to write down the names of 4 people, for 1 through 4, that have had an incredibly positive impact on your life. And for number 5, I want you to write down the name of someone that's had a complicated impact on your life. Positive at times, negative at others, maybe purely negative all the time, but still they're a part of your life. 4 people that have had a significant impact on your life in a positive way, and 1 person that's had an impact on your life in a complicated way, maybe positive and negative, right? And their names or their identifiers. My grandfather's name is Silas. I never called him Silas my entire life. I called him Huelo or Abuelo. So you can write down what you call them. About 20 more seconds. Wonderful. Thank you. Skip a line, new list. Let's title this list Pain. P-A-I-N, pain. The theme of our day. Number down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is going to be a harder list. In a phrase, in a series of 5, 7, 12 words, and just a phrase, I want you to write down 5 moments in your life that were painful. For instance, number 1 for me would be encapsulated with these words: the death of my grandfather. That's how I'd put number 1. That's maybe 5 words. It was the darkest time of my life. I stopped praying for 1 year. The day my grandfather died, I stopped praying for 1 year. I didn't pray for another year. It was a year later near a river that I prayed again. But just capture it in a few words. You know, the death of my that's 5. If you can't come up with all 5, don't worry. Just write down 1 or 2. Wonderful. Well done. 10 possible themes for 10 different possible poems. If you see me with my phone in my hand today, I'm not updating the world of Instagram to tell them how awesome you all are. Although I want to. I'm going to be using my favorite application on my phone. My stopwatch. I love my stopwatch. Why? Because I'm a nerd. What's a nerd? Mexican nerd. I love time. There's a book out there called 4,000 Weeks. You know why it's called that? Because it's all you get. That's it. Then you are thoroughly dead. I've got about 1,721 left. We only have so much of it. Every second is crucial. See what you can do in 5 minutes. Before you write, right now, look at the 10 things you just wrote down, the 8 things, the 7 things. This isn't about quantity, it's about quality. And put an asterisk or a star or underline the one you think has the most poetic potential today for the possibility of you writing something about this person or this moment. Put an asterisk or a star by the one you think has the most poetic potential today. And now, you are not going to write a poem. No. You're going to write, call it a micro essay. Call it a mini piece of memoir. Call it a journal entry. In sentences, in a paragraph or 2. I want you to write in that moment, but I want you to do as all great writers do. I want you to paint a picture of it with your words by using sensory details or imagery. That's how you bring it to life. That's why your favorite writer is your favorite writer. They use imagery, and they also employ sentence variation, which ties into the music of the language. Anyway, don't worry about sentence variation. Just think about imagery. You're writing things that people can see in their mind's eye, or hear in their mind's ear, or smell in their mind's nose. Paint a picture of this moment with them. Try and focus in on one moment, one singular memory with that person or with that pain. You won't have time to capture it in its entirety, but you'll get a good start. You have 5 minutes to write. If you want to move and come back, feel free. If you're comfortable here, your 5 minutes begins now. Not a poem, just a paragraph or two about this person or this pain. So we had a moment earlier where you were challenged, if you felt safe, to stand up and offer a hug to someone. When I was in Mocoso, I served the church. I served La Virgen de Guadalupe Cathedral in downtown Dallas. And I was an altar boy. There was talk of me becoming a priest when I was in Mocoso. But I like the ladies, you know? One in particular. I used to get in trouble at Mass. Because there was a moment in Mass where, we should probably separate church and poetry, I'm sorry. But anyway, there was a moment in Mass called Peace Be With You, where you just walk around the church, and you're supposed to turn to the person behind you and the person beside you. I don't know if you've ever been to La Virgen de Guadalupe Cathedral in downtown Dallas. It's immense. And I always thought it was my job during that moment to shake everyone's hand. I was like, I've got you. Wait, stay, peace. I've got peace for you. And the priest would yell at me, and my grandfather would yell at me. So, you don't have to hug. You don't even have to offer a crisp high five. Let's just take 90 seconds, and let's go around the room and just make eye contact with someone and say something to them that's kind, all right? And if you feel comfortable asking them for a handshake or asking them for a high five or asking them for a hug, don't be upset if they say no, because this is a safe space. But we're gonna spread peace. Just say, I see you. Just say, I hope you have a beautiful day. Just say, thank you for sharing your pain with me, whatever it might be. You have 90 seconds. Stand, go, share. I'm gonna close with 2 pieces. Y'all are phenomenal. Writing about my mother and my father is difficult for me. Did you hear how I said that? I said my mother and my father, I separated them with silence, because I never saw them in a room together in my life ever. I used to think my mother was a willow and my father was an oak. But the tree I fell from is crooked and broke, split in 2 by lightning. That's why there's nothing more frightening than the sound of my raised voice in the direction of my youngest daughter. You see, I never want her to look at me the way I imagine I look at my father, right as I stare him in the face and ask him, how could you leave me in a place where oak trees are as scarce as 2-parent families, where the first word a hungry child learns is, please. Ain't no shade under a family tree when a father leaves. Just boughs as broke as the vows he spoke the night he plucked me into existence. They say a tree can only withstand so much resistance. I wonder, if you cut my heart in 2 and counted the rings from the center to its edge, would it equal the number of years it's been since you left? You were the taking tree. Took everything you could from her. Took everything you could from me. Left my mother's arms looking for your limbs and grasping only air. That's why she didn't mind ensnaring men who only pretended to care. Somewhere between the muck and mire of a brown girl's fear and a white boy's desires, where my roots took hold, I was less than a year old, nothing more than a sapling, when you left me under the shade of the woman my mother used to be. Don't you see, Father? This is the story of a boy, a dull axe, and a tree. It's taken me years to cut you out of me. Can you imagine the cacophony? The sound of the blade striking against you, the sound of a family being split in 2, and now that I'm through, I find I'm just as stumped as you, wondering what to do with the remnants of you. Maybe carve one of your limbs into a cane. No. I could never lean on you. Maybe sculpt you into a blood-red violin. No, I wouldn't know to begin to find the music in any of this, so I'll carve a coffin from your carcass, give your absence some purpose, and I'll fill it with poems. Most of them true and a few of them lies. I could write about your hands and her eyes. Some will be hellos, but most will be goodbyes. And I'll load you up, cart you far away from me, give you a proper burial at sea. And though my muscles may ache from all that weight, I'll walk you out beyond the break and let the tide take you away from me. Maybe then we'll both be free. Maybe then the world can see that I am the fruit and you are the tree. I fell from you and you failed me. I am the waves and she is the sea. I break away, and she breaks me. I am not you, though you are me. I am the fruit that fell far from the tree. Thank you. One last one, and then I'm going to let you go be lawyers and doctors again. All right? So Occupy Whiteness is not a beautiful book of poetry. I wouldn't describe it as beautiful. I'd describe it as desperate and urgent and necessary. I think I've done 4 beautiful things in my life, which is less than some and more than others. My 2 daughters. Those are my first 2 beautiful things. One particular turnaround jump shot in a middle school basketball game at Spence Middle School. For one shot, I was perfect. It was beautiful. I was beautiful. And the 4th beautiful thing is this book called Arsonist that I wrote a couple of years ago. It's my 4th beautiful thing. I'm going to read you the epigraph, the quote that opens the book. You don't know me? Not really. And I hate to tell you like this, but my father, our father, has died from a Facebook message request I received while writing these poems. That's how I found out. The man who left me all those years ago. That's how I found out he died, from a stranger who shared half of my blood. And so I decided to write an entire book of love poems for him, have conversations with people about him, find out all his strengths and weaknesses, run toward my pain, and see if I can make something beautiful out of it. And so this is about pain, this last poem, but it's also beautiful. And since I'm going to see Depeche Mode in LA tonight with my wife, I want to end on something beautiful. We had tickets for them in Dallas. I had a gig came up. I had to go talk with teachers in another state. I bought us tickets for Nashville, the Nashville show. I've been in Nashville a dozen times. It's one of my favorite cities. I bought us tickets. A gig came up. I had to go talk with students at a college. Tonight's the night, y'all. We're seeing Depeche Mode in LA. Enjoying the silence, absolutely. A college student asked me, do you love all your poems? I said, oh, God, no. God, no. I battle them. But this one, I think I love the day I finalized it, and I've loved it every day since, and I love it today. This is called Archetypes. I used to be a public high school English teacher, and one of my favorite units was on archetypal symbolism, where I would teach them that, yes, it's a river, but it's also rebirth. It means something else. Great writers know this. And I would even teach them that numbers, like even numbers are archetypal. That's the way they appear over and over in plays and short stories and novels. The number 3, it's constantly in literature. And it's the Father. It's the symbol of the Father. The number 4 is constantly in literature. The life cycle. Creation. There's only one thing that can create life. And that's the mother. And then I would tell my students, my 11th grade students, I would say, so why is it that you think everyone's favorite lucky number is... My mom and dad do love each other. No, they don't, Joaquin. So this is called Archetypes. It's broken into 3 sections. First section is called 3. Archetypes. 3. I will tell you 3 things about my father, and one will be a lie. My father left the year I was born. My father's heart, like mine and yours, is made up of 4 chambers, but only 3 work well. My father's left atrium broke the day he walked away from me. There were 3 of us. We all came from different fathers, but the same mother. We all have different colored eyes, but the same smile. We're all different, but the same. We're all different, but the same. We're all different, but the same. 4. I think I've only loved 4 women well in my life. At some point, you should take all the money in your wallet and spend it on the women in your life that you have loved well. At this exact moment, counting the change in my pocket, I currently have just under $7 on me. I would buy the first woman a white peach because she once moaned after biting into one. I would buy the second one a pack of sugar-free gum because she is diabetic. I would buy the third one a disposable camera, which seems insignificant, but oh, can you imagine the possibilities in those 24 exposures? The fourth woman, I would give this poem, as I would likely be out of money at this point. This section of the poem says as much about the fourth woman's love of poetry as it does about my ability to budget money well. I'm writing this poem at the airport. My flight lands at 4 p.m., and there's a very good chance my phone will be dead by then. When I land, I don't want to call the 4 women I've loved well. I want to call all the women I did not love well and tell them just how sorry I am. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. 7. My favorite movie growing up as a kid was The Magnificent Seven, a remake of a classic Japanese film, The Seven Samurai. In terms of films, my favorite childhood movie is An American Bastard. But it's a good one. So am I. So are my brothers. You could teach a class on archetypal symbolism just from that film alone. The star of that film, Yul Brynner, died of lung cancer. Just before he died, he shot one of the most powerful and poignant public service announcements. That PSA ends with Yul Brynner staring into your soul from inside the black and white television, repeating 3 words, just don't smoke. I swear it must have run 7 times a night during the prime time of my youth. And though I can't be certain of it, I think those may have been Yul Brynner's last words. When I was 7, I learned that my father smoked unfiltered Camels. So did Yul Brynner. And though I can't be certain of it, I think in the end, it will not be my father's metaphorical broken heart, nor will it be his actual broken heart that gets the best of him. In the end, it will be his lungs. And I, his firstborn son, will not get to be there to hold his hand when he dies. I will not hear his last words. I will not ask for or accept his forgiveness. In the end, there will be only silence. I forgive you. 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 I just found out my flight is delayed. It will not land until 7 p.m. Will the women I have not loved well forgive me for my silence? Or all the times that I should have been silent but was not? Will they forgive me of my carelessness with money, or my carelessness with all 4 chambers of the human heart? Will they forgive me for loving words more than I love them? Will they forgive me for all the poems I've written about them? Or all the poems I haven't written about them? I want to write a collection of 28 poems, 7 poems for each of the 4 women I have loved well. And though I have loved them all, I will reserve the use of closed form for only one of them. I will write her 7 Shakespearean sonnets. No. I will write her 7 villanelles. No. I will write her 7 epic poems written in rhyming couplets. No. I will write her 7 powerful and poignant PSAs that will all end the same with 3 words, repeating, I love you, 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 I love you. Thank you for listening to me today. It was an honor.